Last week, Rob, we discussed the first episode dropped of the new Disney Plus docuseries, The Mandalorian. They're doing an 8-part docuseries. You and I had different feelings on you enjoyed the episode, but you were really wanting them to go into more details about how things came about with the Mandalorian episode. I personally really loved episode 1, and I thought, yeah, hang tight, they'll get into that stuff. So the other night, episode 2 of the Mandalorian docuseries aired. And, I love Mandalorian. And I really enjoyed the first episode. And the second episode, what a waste of airtime. What a complete and utter waste of airtime the second episode was. Because guess what? Here's my friend, and I'm very much still looking forward to episode 3. Don't get me wrong. I'm very, very much looking forward to episode 3. But I'm watching episode 2. And I'm thinking, okay, this is a Mandalorian docuseries talking about behind the scenes stuff of Mandalorian, Rob. And I'm thinking, great, yeah. Boy, wouldn't it be sweet if they talked about Mandalorian? wouldn't it be great if in this Mandalorian docuseries they talked about Mandalorian? Instead, the whole episode was about, let's talk about just why Star Wars is great. Guess what? Anybody who's tuning in to watch a making of Mandalorian docuseries is already in love with Star Wars. All right. I don't need to hear some big, starts, oh, wow, isn't Star Wars great? Yeah, Star Wars is great. What about you? Do you think Star Wars is great? Yeah, man, I think Star Wars is great too. I fucking know we all think Star Wars is great. I don't know. I don't want to get too of it, but it's just like, this is supposed to be a docuseries, and I love the first part, but they needed to start getting into things like you were talking about last week, Rob. Give us the nuts and bolts. Tell us about who made that phone call and where did this come together, and talk about, I'm sure there will be an entire episode dedicated to stagecraft. I'm sure there will be probably an entire episode later on, but it's like, okay, here we are in part 2 now. Oh, you're not even going to talk about Mandalorian? You're not even going to talk about it? I don't know. I just, it sucks because I stayed up late watching. I thought this was such an effing waste of time sitting up and watching this. So I am starting to feel that apprehension you were expressing last week. I really hope they start getting into, Mandalorian stuff. I don't know. Rob, did you have a chance to check out episode 2? And if so, what did you make of it?
Oh, John, I wish you could have been here sitting with me and Elizabeth watching episode 2 of The Gallery. I was saying that to Elizabeth. I was literally I don't usually talk when I watch things. I was really angry when I was watching it. As you know, over this quarantine time, I spent 6.5 hours working with director Dave Parker making special features for our movie, The Hills Run Red, where we delved into the philosophy, we delved into the origins, we talked about how this movie got made, why it got made, what was the reasoning behind it. I'm watching this thing and I'm like, what? They're literally sitting in a circle. This was such a circle jerk. And I'm like, I don't need to know why I love Star Wars, why anyone loves Star Wars. We have 43 years of understanding why people love Star Wars. And while I did appreciate Dave Filoni's explanation of what Darth Maul's purpose was in The Phantom Menace, from 1999, that was fine. Listening to him talk about all that I found that interesting. What does that have to do with The Mandalorian? I thought clearly what this show does not have, it does not have the actual story of how The Mandalorian got made, because I think politically that's too much of a hot potato. Now, they can't talk about Kathleen Kennedy's first meeting with Favreau or how Favreau got involved with Filoni and how do they develop the show. Maybe they'll get into that, but we're an hour into this show. And what have we learned about the making of The Mandalorian? Why did they decide to make a Mandalorian show? How did Boba Fett's involvement? Was it from the Boba Fett script they were going to shoot? Now we know that Boba Fett's coming back, but that I'm sure they won't deal with that. I want to know anything at all about the conception and the origins of this show. Who was involved? How did they get everybody involved? What did that have to do? Like, the studio was making features. How did live action television shows for Disney Plus come into play? All of these things, the interesting story about how this show originated. I don't know if we're ever going to get that, because this second episode just seemed like a bunch of filler.
It did.
Yeah. Why are they giving us filler when I get it, but if you're gonna tout a making of show, and we already live in a world that has the Lord of the Rings Blu-rays, that has the Alien documentaries, that has Charlie de Lauzirika's Dangerous Days, or Cliff Stevenson's documentaries on the making of the Hannibal TV show. We have already got a lot of awesome documentaries that show how things are made. Give us that. As a matter of fact, one of the great DVD documentaries of all times ever made is The Beginning, that was on the episode 1 DVD when it first came out. The Making of Phantom Menace was fascinating. Yeah. Fascinating. And why don't they use that as a model?
Yeah.
Anyway, don't get me started. But
look, the other thing that really got me is I finally started watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan era Bulls documentary thing. I'm 4 episodes in. Here's the thing. I get it. Like the first episode of the Mandalorian thing, I got it. You're kind of setting stage. Here are the players, all right? And here are the directors, and kind of went into their contributions. Okay, good. But, episode 1 of The Last Dance, if you want to talk about a great docuseries, episode 1 is, boom, this is what this docuseries is all about. All in the first episode, right? By the way, I'm not huge into wrestling anymore like I used to be when I was younger. My wife is. My wife and Corey do a weekly wrestling podcast, actually. But Anne popped on before we went to bed last night. She wanted to watch. There's a WWE is doing a ripoff docuseries of The Last Dance, and it's called The Last Ride, and it's documenting the final 3 years of the career of the Undertaker. Right. And so my wife started watching this, and I thought I'll sit down and watch this with you for a minute. Rob, you don't have to be a wrestling fan to love this Undertaker behind the scenes. This is how these last 3 years played out. And it was only episode 1, and I dug it. And I'm just like, okay, it's an 8-part series. I'm sure you'll get around to it, but you've already 2 episodes in, and you haven't told us a single thing about how did this show come together? Like, not a single thing. And I don't know. You know what? I shouldn't be upset about it. It's just that how excited I was for this docuseries. I love this behind the scenes. No, the one good thing I'll say about that episode, Rob, when when friends of mine and compatriots of mine were hanging Michael Jordan posters on their wall, I was hanging John Knoll posters on my wall. Like, John Knoll was an icon in my circle of people. So John Knoll was, of course, he's the head of effects of Industrial Light and Magic. He was on that documentary. Him and his brother also actually created Photoshop. I mean, the dude is an icon. So it was kind of cool seeing John Knoll, but I just thought it was a bit of a wasted opportunity. Anyway, we got to keep going.
John Knoll pitched the idea of Rogue One.
Of Rogue One, that's right. So he actually took that stuff forward and he did that. He's really cool. I would have liked to have heard more from him because maybe he would have talked about, how they made the show. I don't know. Maybe, like you said, Rob, they'll get around to it. Question is, guys, did you see episode 2 of the Mandalorian docuseries? Fingers crossed it just gets better. Anyway, what did you guys think about it? Jump into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys.